Hi there, this is Tom Alston. Today's issue of the Winning Pitch broadcast features a friend of mine, a fellow Grant Cardone licensee, and he's going to walk you through his life, and you're going to pick out periods of his life and the decisions that he's made, and our hope is that it'll inspire you to become successful, just like Doug. So, Doug, it's all yours.
Hey, great, Tom. Appreciate the great introduction. I do know one thing, that I'm super humble to even be sharing my story with you. And not that I'm anything special that I'm going to take you somewhere, but I just want to share a little bit of my story with you, and maybe I could be an inspiration to you.
Wonderful, wonderful. That's our mission. So where do you want to start? Do you want to start in the womb? Do you want to start in grammar school, or do you want to start yesterday?
I think when would now be a good time? That's what I always come back with.
Okay, well, then start.
I'm going to probably start at age 14.
Good.
I was very, very fortunate at age 14. I was able to see Jim Rohn, Rich DeVos, Jay Van Andel, Zig Ziglar, and Dexter Yeager one weekend in Omaha, Nebraska, and that day changed my life forever.
Okay.
Those guys actually basically instilled the dream. I actually got the dream at age 14. I knew pretty much what I wanted to do. I wasn't quite sure how, but I was always pretty good. When they trap shoot, you pull, aim, then you shoot. Well, I always pull, shoot, then aim.
I've always lived that way too. Sometimes it's not the smartest thing in the world, but I've always said, ready, shoot, aim.
Yep. I tell you, if you're a really good shot with the shotgun, your reaction shoot and the muscle memory, if you point in the general direction, it's a rare occasion I miss.
Cool.
I miss occasionally, and it's really humbling, but I work the very next day as hard as I possibly can not to miss.
Got it. So I'm sorry for interrupting you. Continue.
Oh, no sweat. But because I was so impressed what these guys had to tell me, and I'm very simple-minded, so it was really easy for me just to really strap on that dream. Where they always talk about our brain doesn't know the difference between something we vividly imagine or something we've actually experienced. I did receive that day. Those guys really instilled the dream in me, and they told me if I did this, that I could do that. And basically, on that, on that very day, that's what I did. I put my head down to the grindstone. I wanted to own my own body shop, so I went to the local library and I got a book, and I just started reading about how to fix and pound fenders and do I didn't realize it was more than just pounding fenders, but it went from pounding fenders to when I went to college. When I got out of college, I was going to be I wanted to go into teaching this type of skill, the autobody repair, and they turned my old school into a prison. So those last 2 years I was going to go to school, it's now a prison in South Dakota. But I'm
sure there's a story there, but that's not for today.
You know what's really crazy is my mother is a preacher, and my mother has ministered at this prison for over 22 years. So it's pretty interesting how that's kind of webbed together. And she's always believed in me, encouraged me, and watered that seed, took care of it. It took me an awful lot of years to really, really get what I had to grasp. But I mean, obviously in success, there's an awful lot of work. And if you really, truly want success, if that's what you call it, it's spelled W-R-K. You have to work really, really hard at it. But when I graduated, got out of college, I actually went south to Texas for a couple of years, and I worked for some of the biggest players in my industry. And they actually basically showed me how to do it. A couple of years in, I actually journeyed back to my hometown in Mitchell, South Dakota, and started my shop. We started in a 1,600 square foot shop. 1 year later, I bought the building and expanded into 3,200. Year later, I expanded into 4,200, another 1,000 square foot office. And then in 98, wrapped it up in 99, expanded pretty majorly. And we're at about 11,000 square foot today. And I'm getting ready to add on about another 12,000 square foot. But my first month in business, I fixed about 29 cars and I thought I was a rock star. Today, we closed over 2,800 ROs this last year. So I had 2,800 touches. That's an awful lot of cars. I never thought that could even humanly be possible in my area. My market area is about 15,000 people, but it's expanded to over 60,000. And it's probably closer now to that 80 to 100,000.
So are you trying to tell me they're all just really crappy drivers and they keep bumping into each other?
That's what we're banking on. So, well, it does help when the animals run. We have a deer during deer season, the rut, the actual deer, we really have an increase in business. We've had really, we've seen the big mow in the last year, believe it or not. Even with all the COVID, it just cranked up. And Tom, about 13 years ago, we worked really hard on our net profits and our profitability. And like paint materials, for instance, in our business is about 10% of your sales. Well, because of that, and I work really hard, a lot of my colleagues made 45 to 50% on that margin, and I could never do it. 15 of us got together one time and realized that we were all paying a different price. So we formed a company. It's almost likened to a Sam's or a Walmart. And it started at about 9. Now we're in 21. We have 21 stores in my Key Choice group. I actually have really great members in that. There's 21 of us total. But then that has started to evolve into training. And what was birthed 15 years ago, just for my own selfish, I want to be the top in that 50 to 55% gross profit on my paint materials. That's what started this company. We're like, man, if we band together as brothers, we can make this deal work. And my vendors, they told me that I couldn't do that. It's pretty funny. I went to Minneapolis, Minnesota. I filled my truck full of materials, brought it back. They said, well, you can't do that. I said, well, I already did. And because of that, it's really, really grown into multi-million-dollar company, and we're about supporting our members and helping them grow. And we've all become super successful because of that one thing, that birth, because we were at the point of like, man, this isn't working. And that one thing, Malcolm X always talks about, that which you do not hate, you will allow. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of a defining moment for me. I was like, you know what? There's more to this than some big company taking advantage of all these great technicians and body shop owners that want to grow their empire, but they shouldn't be taken advantage of. So that's really what formed our other company.
So the group that got together to do this, were your competitors?
We stay out of competitive markets. So in the future that possibly could be, but we try to go into markets to where there's really not someone that's competing with each other.
Okay.
So we're regional. We're in 5 different states. We're starting to cover the map pretty good. And what we're trying to work on is closing the gap a little bit so we can be more of a regional performer for the insurance industry, possibly too, and the customer, because we want to serve that base. But we want to step out to more to where in this new product, I'll be able to be in the more like a 48 states, maybe.
Okay.
It's more, some of it's virtual. It's be like me learning from you. I could learn a lot from you because of you understand the tax scheme. Well, the body shop business, what we do is really virtual, but what we want to do is take what we know me and my partners know that's virtual and become the teachers. And we also, like Jim Rona says, when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. Not only the student will be transformed, but so will the teacher. Well, these people that I used to mentor and I've helped them grow very large today, and there are some of them are multi-shops, they're starting to teach me, Tom. So
Awesome.
some of the things, this baby is super valuable, and we can teach just about anybody that really has an open mind and opens the parachute a little bit. So for the possibility.
Got it. So I want to take you back a little bit.
Sure.
What caused you to go to that meeting with all of those dynamic people at the age of 14? Is that something that your parents had you do, or did you do it on your own? Tell me about that.
Yeah, I was super fortunate. My parents were in Amway.
Okay.
And man, that was powerful stuff. I was really introduced to network marketing at that point. And my parents were pretty good performers in that, basically selling soap, but it was more networking with the people. My mother's a great networker, and I know that's what's really helped me grow my business. Well, they always say in sales, what throw the rock up and the first person close to the rock. And for me, I'm not afraid to talk to anybody. Brian Tracy told me about 25 years ago, whatever it was. He said, if you really didn't care what anyone else thought about you, what would you do differently or change in your life? And that's became more of a mantra for me more because I do believe. And I was really fortunate because my dad had really strong beliefs. So I would ask if I even ever had a doubt about anything, I would ask my dad. And my dad would say, well, one time I said, well, Dad, I want to buy this crash car and I know we can resell it. He said, well, what do you think? I said, well, I think we should do it. He said, well, let's do it. So he lended me his belief early on. He was a pretty high performer in sales, but because of my dad's belief that's why I'm where I'm at too.
Well done. Okay. So I'm again, I interrupted you. So go back and tell me about what you're doing now with this organization and why it's helping you be successful.
Oh yeah, well, in our key choice business, a good buddy of mine said, he said, service to many leads to greatness, not service to a few. Some you can't serve, and don't get stuck there. But because of some of these guys that believed in me, took this even one step further. I've had the really great pleasure of mentoring some young colleagues in this business, and they're high performers today. And it's, for me, that is probably the biggest reward. And a lot of these guys are the new teachers in our key choice model, really. They're the younger generations that are coming up, and they're real. I mean, it's amazing what they're doing. I'm so proud of all these guys in my industry.
Well done.
I'm more passionate every day, Tom. I get more damn excited about this every day.
I could see that. I've known you for a little over a year. I guess we met at the licensee meeting, in February last year?
Yeah, Tom, actually, you and I probably met around 3 years ago. It was in April, and it was actually a boot camp that Grant put on.
Oh, okay. I thought I knew you when we first met, but I just didn't remember where.
We actually, and you really encouraged me, you and your wife, and one thing I really appreciated about you is how you treated your wife. I learned a lot from you and how you treated your wife is how I should treat my wife.
Well, I appreciate that.
And I'm super grateful for that. But you really had that, nothing but great to say about Grant. And I know that boot camp, I left that boot camp, up there say, oh yeah, I'm gonna have 30% increase, 40, whatever that jazz, right? But I bought into that. I drank that Kool-Aid, Tom. I'm telling you what, I came back. We were there in April. I came back in May and had about almost a 40% increase in sales because I used to believe in me 90%. I took that 90 to 100 and not 120, it's 100. I give it everything I had. And I'm like, you know what? If I give it everything I had, like Grant said, and I could have even done better. I know I could have done about another 5 to 6% better. And I closed some of those deals like a day later. but that doesn't count. Like if you can't see the taillights, it doesn't matter. But that boot camp, it changed a lot of stuff for me.
So tell me specifically about that boot camp. What was your big takeaway and what did you do with it?
You know what? Grant basically gave me permission. All the things that I had learned in books. I mean, I've read a couple thousand books, whatever the heck, that doesn't matter anymore. But all the books that I had read and or people that I'd met, these other guys were talking about how much they had increased their sales. And because what they say, facts tell and stories sell.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when they were telling me their stories, man, I was buying into their stories because I would talk to them on the side note and they're like, well, this is what we did. This is how we did it. I'm like, really? And I started taking notes and then I'd follow back up with these guys and they're like, yeah, we did it like this, this, and this. I basically mapped it out and I did some of the same things that they did. And immediately I didn't quit on the first or the second or the third. And if I had to follow up on the fifth time, I just kept staying after it because I would be cheating you if I didn't sell you. And Grant gave me that permission. You gave me that permission. Jared Glant gave me the permission. And everyone I had a connection with in that room basically gave me permission. So as you start pitching and catching back and forth with these people, it's not a bunch of BS. I call it belief system. It's their belief system, and they're basically transferring that to you. They believe in you. Like Banco says, treat a man as he appears to be and you make him worse. But treat a man as you potentially see them. That's what they become.
Well said.
I basically become who I really saw myself to be. But freaking GC gave me permission, and along with everyone in the boot camp was responsible. I made some really good contacts there. Remember where you had to go out and you had to talk to someone and ask them how much money they made and you couldn't build any rapport. I knew. I went to the bar, ordered a drink, the guy right next to me. The first thing I asked him, I said, well, what do you make per hour? He's like, oh, I don't know, about $470. I said, oh, you're an attorney, huh? But it was so cool immediately. And then this friend of mine, Jason Rash, he's like, well, hey, let's go get tacos downtown. We'll go eat tacos, and then let's all walk the beach on the way back. And there were 6 of us and one girl, Bristy, and we had to take turns on who asked the next person. Mm-hmm. So we had the rapport that we were building the rapport. Not only that, I built lifelong friends in all these people. They're really tight we're a tight group. Mm-hmm. It was like the Rat Pack. But one guy runs into these 2 guys, and one guy said we make about $300-400, and then the next guy gets scared. We ran into a couple of guys pedaling, not, probably a little bit rougher guys, but it was so funny. But we all, and the responses we got from every one of the people, it was so cool. But that
can you give me some examples?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, some people like, yeah, well, I make about $70,000. Some guy be just easy going. He's the type of guy that almost would buy you a beer. And then, we build a little rapport after, but we had to ask them point blank, how much money do you make? No rapport built or nothing. So it's basically getting out of your own skin. And then the next person, it was so fun. And man, some people like, wow, well, we can't share that information, but it was so cool. We built really good rapport with a lot of these people. One time we had about 12 people around at the same time because they saw what we were doing on the beach. But it was so fun, and I'll never forget that. John Max always says, create a moment and visit it often, but create that moment. And that moment for me was the boot camp, but it was also the Rat Pack pulling together. And we believed in each other. Sometimes they almost had to prod me a couple of times. I'm like, well, this is out of my skin. But we said we would do it, and we all got together. We met this other guy when we got back, Henry. I always call him Einstein, but he's a realtor. He's out from like Jersey, New York, and Jersey in there. And we told him the same thing. And we're like, well, you ask him. Well, immediately, he's right up talking to a person in the lobby. We really never had to rally him. He's just that kind of guy, approachable, really, really, really great guy, really great heart. but he almost, and because of that, he's became pretty tight with me too, because of that one time.
Did you ask him how much money he makes?
I never did, but I think that would be a good question the next time I call him. Hey, Henry, how much money you make?
Yeah, there's lots of great stories where it's like Grant tells you to go out and ask somebody to give you $1. And it seems weird, but once you do that, it kind of it's breaks the ice, or you get to realize that by sometimes all you got to do is ask,
Yep,
and you get what you want.
yep,
And to me, it just shows how starved for real human to human communication people are on this planet. And then there's the reserve guy. Oh, that's none of your business. Well, the IRS knows, your bookkeeper knows,
yeah,
your wife knows, so why can't I? It's like, you're not the only one in the world who knows. Your employer knows how much money you made last year.
right. You could
So
probably Google it.
yeah, you probably can. And they're the ones who probably put that information up because they had a couple of drinks someplace and they were bragging about it.
Yeah,
Or, it's just, it's the one thing that COVID did for me was that you really, really showed how much you miss the human connection in conversations, because
oh,
while you and I may be talking to each other and we can see each other, thank God for Zoom and the other platforms that do this. That's not a product endorsement, but can you imagine just having all these conversations over the phone? You never really get to know, because you can't see people's reaction. You don't get their emotions.
yep,
You can get it a lot better than you can out of a letter or an email. But I miss the connection with people. I didn't like it when we call him Governor Gruesome. It's Gavin Newsom, who's Nancy Pelosi's nephew, I think. He shuts all these businesses down. So I can't bring people to work. So we had to do everything virtual. So because I knew it was coming, I had to set up a way for them to communicate with me. And for certain people, they have to be able to work on their computers at work. So I had to work out a way for them to, either VPN or using whatever software we use to do that. And so I could make it look like they were still working here. But the thing that I missed was the meeting, because we spend about an hour in the morning after we have our success meetings, and we go into training cycles on the closes, and then we learn how to pitch our particular servers. But then in the middle of the day, I teach people, have a class where I teach people how to pitch our services. And that's, for me, it's really hard to do over a Zoom call, because the connection is just different for me. And that probably has to do with that. I'm in my 70s, where these kids are all in their 20s and 30s. But COVID taught me that I can do a lot more things than I thought I could do, because my initial reaction was, I'm going to go burn the Capitol down because this little Hitlerite thinks he can tell me I can't come to work. Well, the cops were driving down the other side. I'm right off the freeway, right on the other side of the freeway where all the malls are, and making people leave all the stores. So that's how dictatorial this state is. And, how old are you, Doug?
I'm 57.
So I'm 15, 16 years older than you are. So we're almost from the same era, not exactly. It just, I never saw this coming. And I'm a student of history, so I really, really, really am interested in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, and I follow all the things in the rise to power of Hitler and the Nazi Party. And I see the exact steps being used today by the socialists that the Nazis used. And it just drives me nuts. Why can't people see that? Well, because they were never taught anything.
Yeah,
They go to a completely corrupt educational system that has a political agenda to push, because they're trying to create people that basically are robots or work for big corporations. And I was never interested in that. Although I have worked for other people in the past, I always knew since the time I was 6, I'd be in charge of something. And I just kept pushing till I got to the point that I was in charge of something. And I don't mind the bad times. I don't mind taking responsibility for when something doesn't work, that it's totally my fault. I actually like that, because when something doesn't work and somebody else tells me to do it, I blame it on them, and that's not good for me. So
Right.
anyway, I apologize for using up your time. This is your
Oh,
time to tell your story. So
it's valuable. I love the pitch and catch because that takes me to a part of your journey, but that's kind of an intersection point where our journeys meet, and they don't collide, they mesh together. And all you do is expound on me that I have to be a really good teacher too. You have to initiate that question, but it's been great, and it's my mindset's so blown up in the last month. Things that I've written down for the last couple of months, things are just happening like one right after the other.
well, they should be that way because, as Grant says, white space on your calendar is the devil. And I know
Yeah,
from my stand, if I have nothing to do, I have a tendency to get in trouble. But why? Because I learned when I was young that getting in trouble was fun. Nobody ever punished me so bad that I wouldn't do it again. So,
yeah,
and that's not necessarily a good lesson to learn, but
yeah.
the truth of the matter is, I know as a spiritual being, I always survive it. I always come through it. And, I'm a little bit cavalier in my attitude sometimes. And I'm always shocked when I find myself introverting and becoming really, really conservative. And I don't mean that in the political sense. I mean it in the refusing to take action, being average, being comfortable standpoint, because I love to play. I love to goof around, and I'll do that with anybody. And so, I mean, it drives my people in my company sometimes crazy, the ones that are the managers and have to drive the machine and make everything happen. Why are you always nice to everybody? Why shouldn't I be? They can get the orders from the order people or the sergeants and the majors in the organization. I sit at top. I get to be nice if I want. Well, and the reality is that I like people and I like communicating with people, and you know, I can be taken advantage of. I don't really care. It's a flaw in my character, and I know that. That's why I have my beautiful wife Julie, because she's tough as nails. And well, you've met her, and thank you very
Yeah,
much for what you said about her.
yeah.
Do you remember what the conversation was, or specifically what I said to you that acknowledged the way that I treated her?
Well, most all the time you always praise, and and then you acknowledge. You always validate and acknowledge her in conversations, but you always lean on that type. I mean, it just shows me what kind of relationship that you have with your wife.
Mhm.
And I thought I had it all figured out, and my wife didn't. But I remember when I stayed home with my daughter for about a week when she was about 2 years old. She's 20 now, and I thought I did everything. I make it all happen and all this. And then I was like, wow, I stayed home with my daughter for a week taking care of my daughter. I was like, oh my word, I thought I did all the work. Now I know who does all the work. My wonderful wife, she's like, she lets me know though. She's that blind spot indicator for me. And the days I think I have it all figured out, when I come home, she lets me know I'm marginal at that point. So it's been great, but I wanted to model that because it does matter. It does
Absolutely.
matter.
And I learned that probably 20 years ago about always acknowledging people. And from a standpoint of raising children, I have a viewpoint that little kids are just adults in little tiny bodies, and they're trying to get back to being an adult. And if you treat them that way, surprisingly enough, you wind up with
Yeah.
with a centered adult who is responsible for cause and effect, and and knows how to exchange with people instead of being in, oh, I hate to say this, kind of a rip-off mentality. I mean, I just, my kids don't live at home with me. You know, I told them that you can go to any college you can afford because I'm not going to pay for it because I don't believe in college. And that shocks people. Listen, I'm going to tell you, I want this message is from me to whoever is listening to this. You can spend money on Cardone University and you'll get 10 times the education that you can at any college. 10 times the education. It'll be better for you. If you're not going into some kind of field like nuclear physics or brain surgery, you don't need college. College is a place to get away from your parents and screw off and drink beer. That's what I see it as. And you know, I apologize in advance to anybody who I piss off, especially all the teachers in the colleges, but most of what they sell you is dribble. In this country, statistically, within 7 years, most people are in a career that has nothing to do with what they went to school for. So what did they get out of college? You know, whereas I, at the age of, I don't know, 65, 66, got on Cardone U, and I still do my 6 segments every day. In fact, I started a contest with my employees. Whoever in the week, because every Friday morning, as a management team, we get the progress reports of all your team members. Whoever has the most Cardone U segments and maintains an above 75% passing rate, we give them a Starbucks card, and it's amazing. It's doubled the amount of content that they're watching because they're going for something. And
That's awesome.
You know, the reality is that from you won last week, right? Yeah, I mean, it's little things like that as an employer that I grew up in a large family. There was 8 kids, and that's the environment I like. I like an environment of totally responsible to each other. Teamwork's one of our core values. And I work really hard. I work specifically hard on the hardest thing I work, or the most attention that I have on anything that I'm doing when I'm in my business, is enforcing the core values, making sure that everyone's bought in. Because if you don't buy into my core values, I don't want you here. Because the core values are the pillars that hold up everything that we do after that.
Yeah.
It's disappointing to me how many people between 20 and 30 don't get that. How many people don't understand that? But I hired them, and it becomes my responsibility to raise their level of responsibility. And Cardone U really teaches people about their confidence. If you stay with it, your personal confidence will come up high enough. If you don't do that, you're stuck in the swill that many people live in. And I find it really, really important, especially in these days of Antifa and all those idiots, that there's some core values in this country, and they go back to the original documents, and they're not being read, they're being challenged, they're being changed and converted all the time by very, very evil people. Now you let me get on my political soapbox. and you know, the Constitution is not even studied in most schools these days. It shocks me. It absolutely shocks me. How could you not care? Because everything is instant gratification now. If I can look it up and there's a video about it, I'll learn something. If I have to read it, I ain't gonna bother. And I'm whining again. So anyway, this is your chance to motivate people, not mine. And so
I think the motivation part is like when you really become that student. And I'm so fortunate by, I've run into you, Ed Milet, Andy Purcella, all these other people, Coach Burt, Ken Jocelyn, all these other people that I would have never had a connection with. That's the bigger power. And be sure that you keep each other in check, because your core values, like you're talking about, are the pillars of trust. if you don't know what they are, there's no way that you could ever enforce them. And then it's going to erode your own behavior.
The most important thing I learned from my connection with Brandon Dawson, are you connected with Brandon at all?
Oh, yeah, Brandon's awesome.
Is that
MMM, 3 M's, model mimic master.
Yeah. So he told me something. He said, because when I first got introduced to the core value from his perspective, and I said, here's a lot of things that are what I think are my core values. And he pointed out to me that one of my core values, which was financial freedom, can't be a core value, because core values should be something that you're perfectly willing to fire people over. Changed my whole perspective on what core values were. I thought I had pretty good ones, and some of them I still have. I still have always had the ethics and the teamwork and the accountability and that kind of stuff. But so boom, it was gone the next day after he told me that. So it has to be something that you can demonstrate to your employees that this is what we're all held accountable to.
Yep.
And thank you for including my name in that group of people, because I know most of them. And you know, their stature to me from where I'm looking is they're better than I am, or they're more prolific or more promote than I am. So I appreciate that you've included me in their group. So I have a couple of important questions to ask. If you had the opportunity to go back to your, let's put it at 15, because you've already been, I want to make sure it's after you went to that meeting, and tell yourself something, what would it be?
Maybe you could do it quicker, maybe. But at the end of the day, I was so fortunate because my parents always encouraged me. They told me I could do anything that I set my mind to. I didn't always believe it. So where they say repetition is the mother of skill, thank God that my parents continually encouraged me and told me I could do it. But I would tell them that I could do it. I could tell myself that I could do it at a much younger age. And then I believed that you're more powerful than you realize. That Shad Helmstead wrote the book called What You Say When You Talk to Yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That probably one of the things that's probably changed the most for me.
Awesome. Good luck.
And being that they talk about, you know, like Grant and Tony Robbins always says too. Tony always says, don't look at it as world is happening to you, but it's happening for you. And Grant always says, don't look at it as world happening to you, but it's happening because of you. And when I kind of got that figured out, then I just surrounded myself with people that believed that. But I also surrounded myself with people that didn't necessarily believe what I believed. And what I mean by that is there's a lot more power in some of the diversity that you can get connected with sometimes than make it an adversity. So that diversity takes you a lot more places in culture.
So give me a practical example of what you just said.
Well, someone may totally have the conception of this is the only way you can do it. And someone will bring a different strategy to the plate because their culture allows them to. And they're doing this almost the same thing, but 10 times as fast. And sometimes it becomes 10 times as fast because they're more of an expert in efficiency. Sometimes being super efficient can make the whole program less efficient. But once you figure that out and you take the magic and you pull it all together, and then you kind of go, wow, you're like, wow, there's some power in this because you realize the power.
So can you give the listeners and the viewers an example of how you can get so efficient that you become inefficient?
Oh, absolutely. The book, it's called The Goal. Elijah Goldtrot wrote the book called The Goal. And they had machines in that program where they had this machines were 300 and 400% efficient, right? So that's going to make everything super great, right? But because the machines were so efficient, they had to bring semi-load after semi-load of steel in, stock these plants with total chaos in inventory. So their costs go way up because these efficient machines, and then all the other things were sitting waiting because there was too much of we call it overproduction and lean. So it's a lot of overproduction and then a lot of people waiting. Not only that, you don't always just have to wait, but then you get a bunch of product that sits there as inventory when it needs to get produced, and it makes an entirely inefficient model.
That reminds me of have you ever heard the story about how the layout on a typewriter or a keyboard was created?
No, I've never heard it.
When they first did it, and I'm paraphrasing this, so I apologize to someone who knows the actual facts. When they first did it, they picked a layout for all these keys, and it was probably alphabetical, just so you know that. And it was I think it was a typesetting machine for the printers, okay? And they found out that these people could type so fast that the typesetting equipment couldn't keep up with it. So they found that there was a way to lay the keys out that jumbled it all up, and it slowed their production down to the point that the typesetting could keep up with it. And the QWERTY QWERTY or however you say that type of keyboard that we all use today was a reduction in efficiency to make something work. And you know, I thought about that and I go, well, why don't, if that's true, why don't we switch it back?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, because you know, it's like do you remember when they tried to change all the gas machines in this country over to liters?
I'm not sure. Like the gas machine?
The gas pumps, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
It didn't work. Some yo-yo decided he wanted to make us like Europe, and there's very little about Europe that I admire, other than spaghetti and women. I'm not a wine drinker, so I have to leave that off the table. But what's the point? You know, you do this. There's a way to do things, and there's a wrong way to do things. And like Grant says, best known always beats best product. So. Yep. What happens is that somehow this particular way of doing things, which is half the efficiency of this becomes the standard. And yep. That's because whoever promoted this product kicked this company's ass in promotion. Yep. And that's a hard thing. I have a young nephew who's a winemaker, and he makes incredible wines. And I've heard this from all of the people that I know that are wine connoisseurs, including I've been at some of his events where people are amazed. Oh, this is so good. And he got into that business to make great wine. He didn't get into the business to become the best known. And I kept, in the very beginning, I was working with him, and I was talking to him about promotion and marketing, and he wanted to be a winemaker. So now he's about 3 years in. He's pretty, according to his words, he's pretty damn successful, but the gross income isn't where it belongs. I says, well, what do you think you ought to do? He says, it's time to start marketing. And then he stopped himself. No, it's not. I should have done that first, huh? I go, yeah, somebody tried to tell you that, but you know, it's your company. And if you like living on beans and rice, then do it your own way. And I never tell someone no when they have an idea for a business, because who am I to know what's going to work? Who am I to know what the public's going to do? As long as that business isn't being a contract hitman or selling drugs to children at school, you know, where there's not some ethical problem with it. I don't know. I always encourage people to try it. It's just go for it. And my kids have always been that way. You know, if you're expecting me to tell you not to do it, you came to the wrong guy. I'm going to encourage you to do it, because I want you to find out.
Well, and they don't fall far from the tree either. So if there's some things that you're really pig-headed about, which is great, because then I know I have somewhat of a rigid thinker, and then I can balance a good thought by someone like that too. Because if you're rigid enough, I could put you in one of my circles that I know if Tom says this, I can back it up.
Well, that's, now we're talking about the parenting role, right?
You know?
There are, I wouldn't let a young child run and play on the freeway. I wouldn't let a young child play on the balcony over a 33rd floor apartment complex.
Right.
It's my responsibility to create a safe environment, but I believe you got to give them freedom inside that environment, because who knows? And trust me, as a guy that was born in the 40s, I wasn't brought up that way. I was brought up in a Catholic family that my dad had a specific rules and my mom had specific rules, and they weren't always the same rules. So
Yep.
you always knew who to go to get the answer you needed. But things have changed so much that I believe in people giving them space. I remember the day I brought my 45-year-old son home from the hospital. He's sitting in a little car carrier, and I set him down on the dining room table, and I said, "Let me tell you one thing. If you want to have fun in this life, this is how it works. Do anything that you want, as long as you're willing to put up whatever the penalty is if you shouldn't have done it." And that's always been my life. But that's always been the way that I raise kids, because, there's no absolutes. I learned that being a baseball coach that there's no such thing as always or never. It doesn't exist. There's expansion and there's contraction, but there's always more. There's always, and that's what I like about the whole 10X philosophy of it. The 10X is a goal. It's not a destination.
No.
There's always more. There's always more. And when I look in my checkbook and how the cash flow is going, I certainly know there's always more to be had, because I've done it before. And I'm always working on keeping that graph moving in that direction. And sometimes life works this way,
Oh,
and you have to be willing to deal with it. And
yeah. If you don't have a
like I
challenge,
said,
the challenge is what takes you to the next level, Tom. You know that.
yeah,
Yeah, someone's challenging it, and it's like the only way you can get momentum. But what happens when you become successful and you become more of who you really need to become, and live more uncomfortable? You have so much momentum that what used to be a problem is just another speed bump.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Fun stuff, though.
Yeah, it is. It's, you're going to the good news is you're going to survive it, and the bad news is you're going to survive it.
Yeah.
That whole message that Grant gave when it became clear that the corrupt government officials were going to lock people down and they were going to put an economic solution in place for a health problem. You're going to survive it.
Yeah.
It just keep your head down, keep working, and when something like this pushes back against you, push back against it. We're taught as little kids to run and hide, and instead of pushing back against something, and so it was Grant gave us all permission to do that. Push back against it. Promote, and promote. And I've always lived there. I've been able to create businesses from just promoting, and it's what I did naturally. And then I realized I'm not very efficient at it. I'm not very good at it. And the whole computer and data gathering machinery and stuff like gives me ways of fine tuning that. And hopefully in the next 10 or 15 years, I'll have it figured out and I'll become pretty good at marketing.
I've been trying to nail Jello to the wall for like 34 years.
How's that working out for you?
You better get a shelf. That's all I can tell you.
Yeah, and besides, as long as somebody else cleans up the wall, I'll keep trying to nail the Jello to the wall. Well, I want to thank you for your time today. And here's your golden opportunity, brother. This message is going to be available to all 7 billion inhabitants of planet Earth. What's your message today?
My message would be to dream huge and have faith. Line yourself up with people that encourage you and challenge you, and that would actually believe in that dream.
Pretty simple. This is the Doug I know. Cut to the chase. Get it in the fewest words as possible. and then go back to work. So thank you for giving me this hour and the listeners this hour of the day, and we'll do it again sometime. Okay, brother?
I appreciate it, Tom. Take care, buddy.
I appreciate you.